Welcome to Murder Mile UK True Crime. This isn't a video, it's an audio experience. The only images you'll need for this episode are these. So close your eyes, open your mind, and savour the sounds of Murder Mile. How did a Playboy car dealer become Britain's most hated man? Find out on Murder Mile. Today I'm standing outside of 139 Upper Street in Islington, N1. 2 roads north of the spat which ignited the Golden Goose killing, 2 roads east of the last lunch of Ginger Ray, and 3 roads west of the unsolved Christmas Day murder of the Kentish town copper. Coming soon to Murder Mile. At 139 stands a 4-storey brown brick Victorian terraced house with an Italian eatery called Terra Nova on the ground floor. Like all Italian restaurants, we believe this authentic cuisine is centuries old, having been passed down from Mama Maria to Uncle Luigi to Papa Giuseppe in a Naples kitchen. When in truth, garlic bread, spaghetti meatballs, Caesar salad and pepperoni pizza is not from Italy. We believe it because we want to believe it, as life is about truth, but it's also about secrets and lies. Back in 1971, 139 Upper Street was a fancy dress shop called Beck's Carnival Novelties, which rented and sold costumes, buntings, magic masks and makeup all around the world. With its factory at the back where the Almeida Theatre now stands, it had storage space in the attic, and above the shop was the home of 46-year-old Malcolm Heaysman, his wife Rose, and occasionally their stepson Roy. This was the home where Malcolm and Rose had lived as man and wife. And on the night of the 28th of September 1971, where Malcolm began his ill-fated drive to Wales. But how did a jewellery heist, a car chase, 3 attempted murders, a national outrage, and the killing of a copper by Britain's #1 villain, infamously known as Fat Fred, connect to the murder of this mild-mannered fancy dress shop owner? My name is Michael, I am your tour guide, and this is Murder Mile. Episode 321, Fat Fred, Part 1. We're born into a life, but for many, it's not the life they wish to lead. Malcolm Heaysman was born on the 13th of July 1925 in Lambeth, South London. A grimy, impoverished metropolis, thick with the choking smoke of cars, trains and cranes that he lived amongst but never liked. Some said it was his dissatisfaction with his life that led to his death. As he lived in the city but loved the country, he often shunned his first name, instead using his middle names of Ian and Donald, and said to dress like a proper Farmer Giles. He wore check woolen suits and open-necked shirts. Described as shy, insecure, and only confident when he was drunk or in the privacy of his own home, Malcolm was the son of Donald and Gladys Heaysman, and being raised amongst the colourful costumes and the sharp illusions of Beck's Carnival Novelties, the business became his life, whether he liked it or not. Established in 1919, oddly, even their business was an illusion of sorts, as Malcolm was known locally as Mr. Beck's, Gladys as BB Quantock. The shop and the factory were on different streets, and yet they were connected at the rear. And although this converted cinema had enough space for all of their stock, Malcolm kept an attic room above their flat locked, which he claimed was full of Union Jack bunting. But everyone has their secrets, and very few are sinister. So with Malcolm having run this legitimate business well since 1966, with Gladys and Donald well into retirement, the plan was to sell up the shop, the factory, and the whole kit and caboodle for the tidy sum of £43,000, roughly £250,000 today. Yet something wasn't right with his life, as every night he sat alone in his local pub, nursing a pint. As the landlord would state,
"He went out with a pound, but rarely with a pal.
being a lonely figure lost in his thoughts. 3 years prior, Malcolm had met Rose, they fell in love, and a year later they were married. But even though the lack of sex she blamed on his shyness and inexperience, a bigger secret had driven them apart. Through the night of Monday the 28th of September 1971 and into the Tuesday morning, this large-bellied 46-year-old man with slick dark hair and thick black glasses got into his car and alone drove 170 miles west to the stunningly bleak wilds of Carmarthenshire in South Wales and the foothills of the Black Mountains. As a mummy's boy, his mother had retired to the remote rural village of Gwynfe near Llangadog, and keen to either start afresh with his wife and stepson or maybe just vanish into obscurity. 9 months ago, he bought an old derelict cottage called Godre, which he was slowly renovating. Only he hadn't travelled here alone. Since Islington, someone had been following him. Witnesses told the police that either a gold or bronze-coloured car, a Ford, maybe a Zephyr, a Zodiac, or something similar, had stopped in Gwynfe asking for directions to Godre. A villager said, "Strangers don't arrive here unnoticed," describing the passenger as early 20s, trendily dressed with shoulder-length blonde hair, and the driver as 40s-ish, swarthy and thick-set, and wearing a polo neck jersey. They watched as around sunset, the two men who never hid their identity scoured the uneven lanes of this isolated wilderness, as their headlights were seen rising up the hill, illuminating just sheep, gorse and sky. And as their beams went black, they were last seen crossing the fields towards the lonely cottage. By the time they arrived, Malcolm had finished up. The cottage was shut, his tools were locked up, and as he drove his green van to the lane's end, just 40 yards deep, he was shocked to see just one of these men. That was the last thing he ever saw, and their angry words were the last he would ever hear. The next morning, as he hadn't come home, Malcolm's mother drove to the cottage. In the lane, lying cold and stiff beside his van, she found his body. Covered in blood and barely recognizable, his skull had been broken and his neck snapped, having been repeatedly beaten with a 6-foot-long, 22-pound fence post. Detective Chief Superintendent Donald Saunders of Scotland Yard initially thought that the motive for his killing was a countryside vendetta, as local farmers were angry at the land being sold to Londoners. But the deeper detectives dug, the more it seemed like a grudge killing by a business enemy, with the press stating factory boss killed by rivals, and the violent killing was probably a result of a bitter feud. One suspect was an associate of Malcolm Heathman's, who was born, raised and worked in London. His name was later found in Malcolm's diary. He masqueraded as a charming playboy, but was known to resort to extreme violence when he was broke, and he had a tawdry history of theft and armed robbery. Like the car's driver, he was 40s-ish, thick-set, and wore polo neck jerseys. In a recent heist, he'd used a gold or bronze-coloured Ford as a getaway car. He'd been seen in Wales just days before, and as Britain's most hated man at the time of Malcolm's killing, police across several counties were 40 days into a 45-day manhunt for him. He was on the front page of every newspaper. Everyone in Britain knew his name, and the Daily Mail were offering a £10,000 reward for tip-offs leading to his arrest. On Sunday the 3rd of October, barely a week after the killing, front-page headlines across the UK named him and proclaimed, "Fat Fred is wanted for questioning about the murder of Malcolm Heaysman." Fat Fred's crimes were so vile, they made Parliament debate if they should bring back hanging. His 30-year sentence for robbery, murder and attempted murder was deemed too weak. And even in the 1990s, 20 years after his conviction, he was still demonised in the press as Britain's most hated man. But who was Fat Fred? And why was Malcolm Heaysman murdered? Frederick Joseph Sewell, nicknamed Fat Fred by the tabloids, was born in 1932 in Brixton, South London. A short walk from Malcolm's upbringing, although whether they were childhood friends is unknown. Oddly similar, Sewell was 5'10", 14 stone, and described as a fat man with a chubby face, ruddy red cheeks, short brown hair, and a huge round stomach. And just like Malcolm, who dressed like Farmer Giles, Sewell dreamed of being a tweed-wearing country gentleman with a shotgun crooked over his arm. The similarities between both men makes this so intriguing, as they were both fat, kept secrets, used aliases, and had wives they couldn't commit to. But we've no idea if they were best buddies or bitter rivals. Raised in poverty, as one of two sons to Frederick and Kathleen, during the Second World War he was evacuated to Cornwall, and it was there that he fell in love with farm life. Post-war, he struggled to find a job he liked, as a printer's apprentice, a page boy at Claridge's, and a salesman in a menswear shop. But it wasn't until 1951 that he found his passion, by helping his brother run a pig farm in Kent and fixing cars in his spare time. Said to be softly spoken, generous and polite, Sewell was never short of friends, especially the ladies. And seeking the life and wealth of a country farmer, his first crime, the theft of 300 ball-bearing cases, he was acquitted of in 1949. And when conscripted into national service, over those 3 years he went AWOL 3 times, he said,
"To feed my pigs."
Although while on the run, he also married Joyce Twine. As a mirror image of the heinous crime which marked him as villain number 1. 15 years prior, Sewell had planned the armed robbery of the Ericsson Telephone Company payroll truck in Beeston, Nottinghamshire. In the early hours of the 7th of September 1956, the truck trundled on Trafalgar Road, heading towards the factory's main gates. Parked up on a side road in a heavy-duty Land Rover sat Sewell, his brother Roger, and his 68-year-old father Frederick, all wearing masks and all holding heavy steel hammers. As the payroll truck passed, Sewell rammed it head-on, buckling its bonnet, disabling the engine, and as the masked gang sprang into action, they smashed the windows on the payroll truck, coshed the driver, grabbed 3 bags, and in a split-second operation, they'd vanished in a fast getaway car. In a series of stolen cars, using a gang of 8 men and 2 women, as well as George Bond, who would later be hired in the infamous Blackpool heist, Sewell's gang got away with a haul of £39,000, £1.2 million today. And although the police set up a nationwide manhunt, Sewell evaded capture for 14 months. As a rakish playboy, his lady friends and mistresses risked everything to help him escape, with Mary Bolger and Diane Berry both being convicted. But once arrested, although a violent thug, Sewell quickly turned his charm on the police and the press to make himself seem like the innocent party. He denied this hammer gang came armed with violence in mind. Even though a van was smashed, the street was strewn with destruction and the driver was hospitalized. He denied that he was the boss, claiming,
"I was only the driver,"
and that an unnamed man had invited him into something shady. He denied intimidating witnesses, even though in court it was said,
"Witnesses are unwilling. They all live in London, and if bail is granted, may be interfered with."
So found guilty of a lesser charge, in 1957, Sewell was sentenced to 3 years in prison, but released after 2 for good behaviour. Throughout, he maintained his innocence. He claimed he never knew where the stolen money was. And although the cash boxes were later found buried with their locks broken, all of them were empty. Jailed on his 25th birthday, He was released just before the start of the 1960s, and then became wealthy. Frederick Sewell was a wannabe country gent who liked the finer things in life. He was generous when he had money, but nasty when he had none. By the turn of the next decade, Sewell was a big success. Having ploughed his money into cars, from a humble showroom in Tooting, South London, he invested into several other pitches, earning £400 to £500 a week, roughly £100,000 today. Nicknamed Champagne Fred, it was said that everything he touched turned to gold, and he fulfilled his dream of becoming a rural squire with a £30,000 luxury farmhouse in Surrey. He ate caviar. He drove big American cars. As a ladies' man, he was known to have at least 15 mistresses. He hung out at the plushest clubs in Mayfair and would easily blow £100 on a night out. And although he wasn't much to look at, being wealthy and charming, Fat Freddie Sewell had one big weakness: the ladies. After his first stretch in prison for the beast and armed robbery, he should have returned to his wife. But instead, having met a young hottie called Irene Germain, he spoiled her with jewels and furs, set her up in a farmhouse near Reigate, and when Joyce found out, she divorced him. While seeing Irene, he met red-headed stunner Barbara Palmer, set her up in a £9,000 Orpington house, and as father to her baby Belinda, he spent half his time with each woman, keeping them both apart. And yet, while promising to marry them both, he married Julie Lavinia, but binned her after just a few weeks. In July 1971, Sewell posted the banns at Surrey Registry Office announcing his intention to marry Irene on Tuesday the 31st of August, with a dream to retire to the Isle of Sheppey and run a little hotel. That was his plan. But as fast as he earned money, he spent it, and by the summer, he was almost broke. Again, he would claim that he wasn't the boss of the Blackpool robbery, and he didn't know the details of the heist. Sewell claimed,
"I heard of it when I delivered a car to Dennis Bond."
His cohort from the Beeston raid, who was a fellow car dealer and had just been released from serving 7 years for armed robbery. At a cafe in Streatham, they met Charles Haynes, part owner in a London nightclub whose betting shop was in trouble. And Sewell later claimed he said,
"I've seen a shop in Blackpool on a side road. It's got pricey jewellery, but it's not very well looked after."
And he said he knew
someone who could fence the gems.
Sewell claimed he was reluctant to take part in the robbery, stating,
"I was a last-minute replacement. Haynes was the organiser."
Because he was broke, knew the gang, and was reassured
nothing will go wrong.
Expecting to steal £200,000, roughly £3.5 million today, his cut for £30,000 was a fortune. The last two gang members were John Patrick Spry, a career criminal since he was a kid who provided the stolen getaway cars, a green Triumph 2000 and a bronze or gold-coloured Ford Capri. And meeting Thomas Flanagan in a Bethnal Green pub, he provided the second-hand shotguns and revolvers. Preaching non-violence, Sewell would later claim,
"I didn't think the guns were even loaded."
Yet being a heist which made Fat Freddie Sewell Britain's most hated man, he alone proved himself not only to be the coldest and most callous of the gang, but also the most heartless and bloodthirsty. Situated on England's northwest coast, Blackpool is a very old, slightly creaky seaside resort where generations of working-class families have come to inhale the sea air, make sandcastles, ride a donkey, play in an arcade, eat an ice cream, and all while freezing to death, see the infamous illuminations. Being cheap and cheerful, it's famed for its friendliness. Yet here you wouldn't expect to see a violent heist, a gun battle, and a killing spree so shocking it sent shivers down the spine of everyone in Britain. 2 weeks before their wedding, Fat Fred and his fiancée Irene rented a flat on Cocker Street, 2 streets north of the jewellers. Hiding under the alias of Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, this gave him a chance to keep surveillance on the shop. And yet, if he wasn't the boss of this racket, why would he do that? On Monday the 16th of August, 1 week before the heist, the gang strolled up from London in the 2 getaway cars. Yet dressed in dark suits and sunglasses, like they were mafia dons, Sewell ordered them to change, to stop drawing attention to themselves and waving £20 notes about like they were confetti. Idiots. Apart from that, the jewellery heist, like the payroll raid in Beeston, had been planned to perfection. On Monday the 23rd of August 1971, at 9 a.m, the gang parked the getaway cars in position. A Triumph 2000 by the jewellers on nearby Queen's Square, with its engine left running. Once the raid had happened, they would speed 1 mile north to Back Walbrook Road, hop into a bronze-coloured Ford Capri GT, and as a fast car, they'd floor it out of town in a 3rd stolen car, and head to the moors, hide the jewels, and only return when the heat had died down. The morning was quiet, as the tourists had left and the locals were at work. The target was a jeweller's shop called Preston's, a small but prosperous watch and gem merchant's hidden down a shadowy side street at 14 the Strand, just off the North Promenade. At 9:30 a.m, with the door open, the staff busy, and no customers inside, the gang spied as the 2 large windows were stocked with rings, watches and gemstones from 2 open safes. Unaware that a violent bloodbath was about to spill across the back streets of Blackpool. At 9:40 a.m, Sewell gave the signal. Wearing shabby raincoats, they pulled scarves over their faces, slung bags over their shoulders, and armed with revolvers, they stormed inside like a whirlwind of chaos. Sewell later said of the double-barreled, sawn-off shotgun hidden under his coat,
I had no intention of letting it off. It wasn't the plan. I just wanted to frighten people to do what I wanted, and it worked that way.
Only it didn't. At 9:41 a.m, the gang forced the terrified staff onto the floor.
Hands on your heads, heads down, don't move. Don't say a fucking word.
As they loaded bags full of loot. And although they grabbed as much good stuff as they did worthless tat, in total they'd steal £166,000, almost £3 million today. It was going so well. All they had to do was run. They would be rich, and no one would get hurt. But the heist had gone awry before the plan was even formed, as this supposedly poorly secured shop had a silent alarm. Sneaking into his repair room when the gang was too busy laughing at how rich they were going to be, at 9:46 a.m, the manager tripped it. Lancashire Police HQ were alerted to a possible robbery, and a police car was already en route. Hearing a distant siren, the gang panicked, fled, and as this bungling band of half-wits stumbled out of the shop, their bags tipped and they spilled a decent stash of what they'd already nicked onto the pavement. At 9:49 a.m, the first officers on the scene, PCs Hampton and Walker, radioed in.
Robbery in progress, Preston's on the Strand. 5 men, at least one of them armed.
So firearms units were dispatched. And as a forewarning of their desperate violence, off-duty fireman Ronald Gale tried to stop the last man from fleeing the shop. And with it likely to be Sewell, he barked to this hero,
Move and I'll fucking drop you.
Only to thump the fireman 4 times in the stomach, and with the shotgun's butt, knocked him unconscious. Through incompetence, this well-planned heist soon descended into farce. As when this gang of 5 ran just 50 yards to Queen Square, even though their first getaway car was still there with its engine running. Haynes had locked the doors, and they wasted valuable seconds as he fumbled for the keys. At 9:50 a.m, the PCs radioed,
The getaway car is a greenish Triumph 2000, registration plate Oscar Hotel Mike 674 Echo.
And with it being a priority one, Lancashire Chief Constable Bill Poultry ordered an all-cars alert, roadblocks to be set up, and although PC Walker clipped the car and winged one of the raiders as he tried to make off, the gang's days were numbered as the full force of the constabulary descended on Blackpool. This farce then turned into chaos. As flustered at having been rumbled, the Triumph zigzagged along 3 miles of the back streets, desperately seeking the road where they'd left this much faster Ford Capri GT. But Haynes had lost his bearings as the PCs kept pursuit, followed by squad cars and armed officers. Entirely lost, having doubled back several times, the Triumph came to a hard stop when they found themselves trapped in a cul-de-sac. Police vans blocking their way, and Haynes struggling to wrestle the gear stick into reverse. And as Sewell shoved him aside so that he could drive, his pistol fell to the floor and almost blew his foot off. He later claimed,
"That was the first time I knew the guns were loaded."
but was it? Breaking free and swerving down Dixon Road and Edgerton Road, as Sewell braked hard on Clevedon Road, the Triumph was rammed hard by 4 police cars. And with it crippled and wasted, the gang emerged, and this chaos turned to carnage. The so-called big-hearted playboy barked at the officers, "Move, you c***s!" waving his shotgun as he spat, "Shift, or you'll get this, you fucking bastards!" And with neither side willing to back down, Clevedon Road was set to be a brutal and bloody firefight. With his teeth gritted in fury, Spry walked over to the crashed cop car, and as PC Hampson sat dazed, Spry fired through the window at the unarmed man, shooting him in the chest, barely missing his heart. Emerging from the trashed Triumph, Sewell fired wildly at Detective Sergeant Hillis, but missed. And as Spry and Bond fled down a side street, with Fat Freddy Sewell puffing and wheezing behind them, Flanagan was tackled to the floor by the sergeant, and after a violent struggle, this gang of 5 became 4. The robbers were panicked and desperate, surrounded on all sides, and seeing no way out, as Bond, Spry and Sewell were chased further. From 6 feet away, Sewell turned and blasted PC Walker in the leg. Seeing his officers being gunned down, it was then that Superintendent Gerald Richardson joined the chase. At 10:01 a.m. on Carshalton Street, the threesome hijacked a Morris 1000 van at gunpoint as driven by 2 men from Edwards the Butchers. It wasn't fast, its handling was shit, it moved like a brick turd, and although it was better than running, having floored it, Sewell took a corner too fast, and on the crest of Sherborne Road, he crashed it into a brick wall, buckling the wheel and making it immovable. The detectives pounced on the stolen butcher's van, and as its back doors burst open, as Spry and Bond ran off, Bond shouted at Sewell,
"Shoot them!"
but his pistol had failed. Using the only weapon he had left, Detective Sergeant McKay drove his cop car straight at the twosome, running them both over. And with Spry unable to run, he was quickly caught, as Detective Constable Handley hit Bond over the head with a broom handle. Both men were disarmed and arrested, but this violent bloodbath was far from over. 39-year-old Superintendent Gerald Richardson, known as Jerry, was a Blackpool boy, born and bred. Described as brave and fearless, having served his national service in the military police, he rose up the ranks to become one of the youngest police superintendents in Britain, and he had a no-nonsense attitude to criminals. Seeing Sewell flee, as a fit and sturdy officer, Jerry chased the armed robber down Sherborne Road and into a side alley. Being grossly overweight, Sewell was out of breath, his cheeks were red, his face was sweating, and unable to take a step further, he stopped and turned to the unarmed detective. As a reasonable man, Jerry implored,
"Don't be silly, lad. Give it up. It's over."
And as he reached for the double-barreled sawn-off shotgun, the two struggled, and the gun went off from just inches away. Sewell later claimed,
"I was horrified to hear the gun went off."
Yet as the courageous officer staggered backwards in shock, blood pouring from his guts, his innards hanging out of his crisp white shirt, Fat Freddie Sewell, whose cruel and callous actions as the cop killer would make him Britain's most hated man, fired a second shot at point-blank range. And leaving this married man to die in agony, Sewell fled. Transferred to Blackpool Victoria Hospital, 3 officers were listed as critical or serious. Several had broken bones or lacerations. And 2 hours after his admission, Superintendent Jerry Richardson died of his injuries. It was a bloodbath which caused an outrage across Britain, as many good men doing an honest job for low pay had been gunned down like dogs, leaving wives and children distraught or grieving. 100,000 people attended the funeral of Jerry Richardson at Leighton Cemetery. Posthumously, he was awarded the George Cross, the highest civilian honour for bravery. A street was named in his honour. A memorial was erected to remember him. And the Superintendent Gerald Richardson Memorial Youth Trust was established to help the physically or mentally disabled young people who lived in Blackpool. Every year, he is remembered. But fleeing, with Hayes not far behind him, Fat Freddie Sewell sparked a 40-day manhunt which made him villain number 1 in the eyes of the people, the press and the police. He was hated, hunted, and wanted in connection with the murder of fancy dress shop owner Malcolm Heaysman. But what linked a violent cop killer and a quiet little man with a secret hidden in his attic? The concluding part of Fat Fred continues next week.